What's up, fantasy managers? This is the player pause for Thursday night. I will explain who I will play or pause from the Cincinnati Bengals, and it will help you decide who to start or sit for Thursday night. I know you're interested, so stick around for 7 seconds. All right, before we get started, I want you to know I recorded this on 11/14/2023, a few days before Thursday night. So there are things that can change leading up to Thursday night, but I'm still going to go over this stuff. And I'm going to start with the over and under, which is 46. So a lot of points are expected to be scored. I do think it's mainly going to be coming from the Ravens, but we'll see. The Cincinnati Bengals are 20th in scoring, averaging 20 points per game, but they have improved throughout the year. It is getting better. And 24th in total offense with 301 yards per game. The Baltimore Ravens are first in defensive scoring, averaging 15 points per game, and second in total defense, allowing 273 yards per game. Their defense is pretty good. Pro Football Network has the Bengals offensive line ranked 21st heading into week 11. They've been underwhelming even with Orlando Brown at left tackle, but are improving, and Bengals offense is 18th in sacks, allowing 2.4 a game. Ravens are first in the league with 3.9 sacks a game, and first in yards per play with 4.2. Like I said, this Ravens defense is pretty good, and they're in Baltimore. And with the injuries, there's really only one to go over with fantasy value, and it's wide receiver T. Higgins with a hamstring, and he did not practice today. Okay, let's jump into the players of who I will play or pause, starting with Cool Joe Burrow. His history on Thursday Night Football, Burrow is 2-1 on Thursday night, averaging 2.3 touchdowns at 317 passing yards. Each Thursday night game, he has thrown for 2 or more touchdowns and 0 INTs. Last week, he was 27 for 40, 347 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns and 2 interceptions. I believe he got like 20 points. He also rushed the ball 5 times for 20 yards. Burrow is quarterback 16 versus the Baltimore Ravens, who are the best against quarterback scoring, allowing only 10 points a game. Ravens given up 7 passing touchdowns. That is the least by any defense. They are 4th in the league, allowing 173 passing yards a game. And the Ravens defense has 10 interceptions, which is top 10. At home, the Ravens at home haven't allowed 15 points to opposing quarterbacks. And they played against Deshaun Watson, Jared Goff, CJ Stroud, and Geno Smith. And Burrow's average completed air yards is 4.6, which is the bottom 10th of the league. He's between Bryce Young and Kenny Pickett, but he has 50 to 100 more passing attempts than Young and Pickett, and averages 38 attempts a game, which is top 5 in the league. Unfortunately, Burrow has 3 games with no passing touchdowns, but he has 6 with multiple touchdowns. The trend shows it's 0 or hero. It's either no touchdowns or 2 touchdown games. So if he throws 1 touchdown, he's likely going to throw another. Burrow started the season terribly, but has picked up steam with 3 straight 20-plus point games against the 49ers, the Bills, and the Texans. But this is a very good defense. The Ravens are at home on Thursday night, and it's a division game. The last time these two played, Burrow had 14 points. I don't believe Burrow would score over 17 points. He is my gamble of the week, but I pause Joe Burrow. And now for the only running back I'm going to be talking about from the Cincinnati Bengals, Joe Mixon. Out of 5 Thursday night games, Mixon averages 58 rushing yards and has 0.4 touchdowns. He has only scored 2 in 5 Thursday night games. Last week against the Texans, he had 11 attempts for 46 yards and 1 touchdown with a 4.2 yards per carry, and he had 2 receptions minus 1 yard on 3 targets. Joe Mixon is running back 23 versus a defense that allows 18 points to running backs. Ravens given up only 3 rushing and 1 receiving touchdown to running backs. 4 total touchdowns is 5th best for defense. Mixon sees 8+ men in the box only 9% of the time, while averaging 3.9 yards per carry, which is 0.14 above expected per attempt, but his breakaway percentage is 1.6%, which is 37th in running backs. His longest run this season is 22 yards. His longest run in the last 5 years is 41 yards back in 2019. The Ravens defense is 11th in rushing yards allowed at 100 a game, but Mixon's last 100-yard rushing game in the regular season was over a year ago. you're not expecting to see Mixon break 40-yard runs. He is used a lot in the passing game, but the Ravens allowed 42 receptions to running backs in 10 games. That is 19th in the league. So I don't expect any crazy stat line in his receiving. Mixon is touchdown dependent, but has scored in the last 3 games. Last game, he was fortunate enough that an INT return was stopped at the 2-yard line so he could get his touchdown. He hasn't had a top 5 weekly finish this season and has been in the top 10 only twice. Ravens don't give up touchdowns to running backs. I pause Joe Mixon. Now the wide receiver where when people say sit, you play because he's a stud and you always play your studs. But Ja'Marr Chase, in 2 Thursday night games, Chase has not scored a touchdown and averages 5 receptions for 80 yards. He's wide receiver 6 versus a defense that allows 29 points to wide receivers. The Ravens man coverage ranked is 8th, and they play it 28.5% of the time. Their zone coverage rank is 24th, and they play that 70% of the time. The Ravens have played man coverage at a top 10 rate. Baltimore has allowed a first down or touchdown on just 30% of man coverage snaps, the second best in the league. The Ravens have also allowed just 6 yards per coverage target in zone, tied for the second best in the league. Their 61.4% defense success rate ranks 3rd in the NFL. Ravens allowed 5 receiving touchdowns this season to wide receivers, which is top 4 for defense. Only 2 wide receivers had monster games against the Ravens, and that was George Pickens and T. Higgins. Entering Week 10, Chase has 110 PPR points versus zone compared to 47 PPR points against man. Last week, they played the Texans, who run zone 80% of the time and are ranked 8th in zone coverage. He had 5 receptions, 124 yards, and 1 touchdown on 6 targets. He played 53 snaps and ran 43 routes, which was 2nd on the team in both categories. That's 91% of passing plays. He was targeted 14% of the time per route run. Chase had 101 air yards and an average depth of target of 16.8 yards. His season average of 3.3 separation, which is great. That means he averages 3 yards of space from the defender when targeted. He is 3rd in receptions for wide receivers with 69, and he averages over 7 receptions a game. He's 2nd in targets and 2nd in red zone targets. This is not a great matchup for Ja'Marr Chase. This defense is really, really good. But he's Burrow's guy, and he could maybe do well against his coverage. I think Tyler Boyd will have a bigger game, and Chase will put up flex numbers. I play Ja'Marr Chase. And I still want to talk about T. Higgins, even though he's probably not going to play. I did this earlier in this season with Trevor Lawrence, who likely was going to play a Thursday night game, and then he was put in there. So T. Higgins, in 2 Thursday night games for Higgins, he has 1 touchdown and averages similar to Ja'Marr Chase with 5 receptions and 80 yards. But he had a monster game last year against the Dolphins where he earned 7 receptions, 124 yards, and 1 touchdown. He did miss last week, Week 10, and he's likely to miss Week 11. His stat line against the Ravens in Week 2 was 8 receptions, 89 yards, 2 touchdowns on 12 targets. But I don't expect a repeat performance in Week 11 against Baltimore because Higgins has struggled against zone coverage, averaging just 0.24 fantasy points per route run, which is tied for 88th, to go with a 60.2 receiving grade, which is 73rd. So I pause T. Higgins. And the third wide receiver I want to discuss, the one I'm most excited for, is Tyler Boyd. Boyd, he's a hit or miss type of player, especially on Thursday night. Out of 5 games, he has scored twice, but averages less than 70 yards. He is wide receiver 45 versus a defense that allows 29 points to wide receivers. Only one wide receiver 2 has done well against the Ravens, and that was Elijah Moore, who scored a touchdown last week. Ravens defense are 8th in man coverage, but run zone 70% of the time, and they are ranked 24th in zone coverage. Ravens allow 5 receiving touchdowns this season, like I said before. Entering Week 10, Boyd does better against zone coverage. He has a 58.6 PPR points versus zone compared to 19 PPR points versus man coverage. Last week against the Texans, who play zone 80% of the time, he had 8 receptions, 117 yards on 12 targets. He almost had a touchdown, but he dropped a wide open pass. He played 59 snaps and ran 44 routes. Both were first on the team. He was targeted 27% of the time per route run and 30% share of team targets. Boyd had a total of 107 air yards, and average depth of target was 8.9. And he did this with T. Higgins out, and T. Higgins is likely going to be out again. In week 2 against the Ravens, Boyd has 6 receptions on 52 yards and 8 targets. He also had an end zone target in week 2. I believe in week 11, he has a very, very good chance to score a touchdown for you guys, and I play Tyler Boyd. Now we're at the tight end. This is going to be pretty short. Irv Smith Jr., tight end 45 versus a defense that allows only 8 points to tight ends. Ravens giving up 1 touchdown to tight ends this season, and Smith Jr. has not surpassed 30 receiving yards and only has 4 receptions once. It has 1 touchdown all year. There's just not enough pie for the tight ends. I pause Irv Smith Jr. And now I'm going to just sum up this whole player pause video. Joe Burrow and the Bengals are back into championship form, and his calf appears healthy. Burrow has put up a lot of points against good defenses in the last 3 games, but this Baltimore defense is really good and has shut down a lot of quarterbacks this year. In this rival, I favor the defense. Joe Mixon puts in the work, and he looks better than last year. He gets you carries, receptions, and sometimes goal line work. But without any long runs, Joe Mixon continues to earn 4 yards, 4 yards, 4 yards, and hopefully gets you a touchdown. I believe his touchdown streak ends Thursday. Jamar Chase is Joe Burrow's favorite wide receiver. 99 targets is second in the league for wide receivers. In week 2, Chase was shut down and T. Higgins got all the love. I believe the Ravens will put a top on Jamar Chase and will have a low-end wide receiver 2 flex numbers. I believe he won't find the end zone this game. T. Higgins is likely out. Everything and everyone says he isn't playing. If he were to play, I would still sit him. Higgins had a big game against the Ravens in week 2, but for how inconsistent he is riding the bench in week 11. Tyler Boyd is the wide receiver to grab every time T. Higgins or Jamar Chase misses time. T. Higgins missed week 10, and Boyd led the team in targets and receptions. He's a good fantasy player when given the chance. If the Ravens focus on Jamar Chase, like in week 2, Tyler Boyd should have a great game. I thought Irv Smith Jr. was going to have a decent role in this offense, but he has close to nothing of a role. He hasn't proved anything with only 1 game over 10 points. He averages 4 points per game. Burrow isn't looking his way, and neither am I. And we're at the end of the video. The research I went over will help you decide on who to play or pause for Thursday night matchup. We have more videos coming out this week. Tyler's video is coming out tomorrow. He's doing his player pause on the Baltimore Ravens. If you haven't already, please hit the subscribe, press the like. It goes a long way. We appreciate all you owners out there supporting us. With more videos coming out later this week, I'll talk to you then. Deuces, and thanks for watching.